Well, then I need to kind of introduce the next speaker who you have seen around quite a few times already. So I'm working at the with people from the Max Planck Institute, from the Beeld en Geluid, which is mainly focusing on image and sound. That's mainly because they know way more about programming than I do. And I work at the Huygens Institute for Dutch History and Culture, and also do a little bit here with Transkribus, as you have probably figured out. This is working. So I'll briefly talk to you about automatic metadata or manual labeling. And that has to do with my research project, which concerns the police ordinances in both the Netherlands and Switzerland. And I'm working with police ordinances, and in this case, I'm focusing on the examples from Bern. And I'm actually reusing material that was previously manually labeled. So nearly 5,000 legal texts were manually labeled by Dr. Claudia Schott-Pohl. And she put metadata on each of these texts. So she labeled them according to the topic. And what I was very much interested in is knowing whether the computer could actually do the same job as well as she did. So, mind you, I did this a few years ago. That should probably be the warnings before I started. But I took pictures of all the sources in the archive of Bern. And then I ran a Transkribus model on them. In this case, we combined, and with we, I mean Tobias Heudel kind of did this for me. He combined the Dutch current model with a French model that I got from Maxime Goyer. And this combined model I ran over these texts because they are often quite bilingual. And the character error rate in 2020 was something we would not be happy about nowadays, but at least it got me through the text, and I wanted to get a bit of an idea of what the content was. So I'm currently reprocessing some of the text, and the results are way better and much more readable. So maybe in the future I'll rerun all of them. But just for the background, these texts concerned the city-state of Bern, which was much larger back then than it was than it is now. The ordinances are about the entire jurisdiction. And I used a hierarchical taxonomy. And with hierarchical, I mean, I have 5 levels. And if I count all the topics that are in there, I have between 1,800 and 2,000 topics that I cover. So what I wanted to do is split the texts so that I have an overview of each and every individual legal text that had been manually labeled. This hierarchical structure I put in a simple knowledge organization system, so you have a higher and lower overview. And I basically combined all of the manually created metadata with each of the individual texts. And I used Annif, the Finnish tool created by the Finnish National Library, to match these things and train a model on. And what it then basically does, it looks at the text. So in this case, the HTR text, and it combines that knowledge with the automatic with the manual metadata that I fed it, and it creates a model. And then I ran that over the train on the test set, and these are the results. So keep in mind, I had a pretty large taxonomy, and I used only about 3,500 texts to train on, and then 500 texts to test this model on. And there are various backends, and the most simple one is the TF-IDF. And the most complex ones, or the more complex ones that allow for a hierarchical taxonomy are the Omikuchi backends. And what this basically says, and it's all mathematical, and that was more the area of my colleague, Sarah, is that basically these statistics say that in about 77% of the cases, the automatic metadata that was added to the text was the same ones that were originally manually labeled to these texts, which is pretty good considering that the HDR was quite crappy because it was done 4 years ago, and because it's such a huge taxonomy. So what we have here is that some of these texts had over 10 labels, so 10 topics that they dealt with. One of them actually has 25 topics that were covered, because the earlier in time, the more topics were covered. They just had very lengthy legal text, and the later we come in time, the text becomes shorter, but they are more to just one point to cover. So if there are more than 10 topics that the computer needs to attribute to the text, then in 77% of the cases, those 10 were correct according to the manual labeling. So I found that very interesting to see, and I really hope to explore this a little bit more, because I think that the taxonomy with modern keywords can allow for easy access to archival sources as well. So then we can circumvent issues with different word use. One of my often used examples is that nowadays we would be talking about Roma and Sinti people, but in the early modern period, you would have to talk about gypsies, you would talk about eidolons, and they would have come up with like 20 different words to just focus on these gypsy people that they thought was a proper word then. But because over time, that word changed, we would have trouble searching either with fuzzy search or with full text search. But because the computer can learn from the context, you can attribute automatic metadata to these texts, and it doesn't care which word was used, and it will just add the modern words to the text, and it will allow quick entries to these texts. So that's what I wanted to tell you. And let me run around and ask me some questions. So